But anyway, I'm not going to take up too much time. But, okay, I hear you say I had to kind of write some things down because so much stuff was flooding through my head.
Yeah.
I hear you say it just is. No right, no wrong, etc., etc.
In the world of the human, I mean, we have our rules of what's right and wrong, but ultimately there's no right and wrong. Like, life isn't affected by the actions of the human. But in the human world, we have it's not appropriate to beat up your neighbor, and so we have it relatively. But
so I can't go next door and beat up my neighbor.
But ultimately, it never affects life. Nothing ever is affected. It's and ultimately nothing's happening. But it seems to be. It seems to be. And in the human experience, we seem to have time. We seem to move through time. But it's not a reality. And this isn't a result of time. Time appears in this. And it's a particular experience which comes with a human body. My dog doesn't experience time like the human body experiences time. It's very particular to this machine or this functioning.
Right. And I do hear you mention your dog a lot of times, your dog and children when we were children, but as I'm not a child now, and I have to be responsible. Well, I don't have to be, but I choose to be responsible to pay bills, etc., etc. And that kind of leads into what one of my questions was I seek to find direction as to how to, continue with my life with a purpose of happiness in doing something, but I'm not sure what it is I want to do.
Yeah.
So do I just sit, stand, lay down, and just is this?
Well, the way that it goes in the human world is that the human will always move. I mean, I'm splitting it up into two, but it will always move towards that which is pleasurable. So, like, the desire for happiness as a human is a very normal desire, and that doesn't have to go. And there's loads of different speakers that will talk about happiness in the flow of things. There's loads of different things which can produce more happiness, which is a chemical reaction happening in the brain for the human.
Yeah.
But what I particularly talk about is the freedom that always is, not dependent on the happiness of the human or not. But the happiness of the human. They're two different things. The happiness of the human is a chemical reaction happening in the body, and there's lots of things you can do to make the body experience more happiness. But that isn't you. That's never been you. That's a functioning happening. Who you truly are is God, which is not a thing. No one thing, so it's not happiness or unhappiness, it's not choices or not choices, it's no thing, not the body, it's no thing, but it's everything, and it's always here, and it's totally free who you are to express as it wants, as it does. And at the moment, it's seemingly using the body these human bodies in order to have an experience. But it is the experiencer and the experience. So it is the body and it is the world at the same time. But it's using the body to seemingly have a dual experience. But it's not the reality.
If I'm hungry, I'm still free.
Yes, yeah. Even if you're unhappy, you're still free, because happy and unhappiness are chemical reactions happening.
Oh,
like they're chemicals in the body which are very nice happiness, but it's not something that you can keep permanent. But there are things that you can do which will produce more happiness for the body. Like if you're eating McDonald's every day, 3 times a day, and if you're if you're in a very difficult situation financially, or if you're having to work all hours of the day to support people, then it's more likely going to be less happiness than if those things were changed. But these aren't your choice. You aren't the chooser. Who you are is not a thing and everything. And choices appear in this instrument, but it just is an instrument. Like there's nobody really choosing. But there could be a learning, like the body learns and adapts to its environment of ways to be happier. but it's not anybody's learning. It's not anybody's choice. Choices appear, but for nobody. And that's the non-duality message, but it really doesn't affect happiness or unhappiness, which is disappointing for the person, because the person should be about moving towards pleasure, moving towards happiness. That's a natural momentum of the body. It's the momentum of the flower, it's the momentum of the tree to move towards the sun, which is pleasure, and for the dog to move towards warmth and shelter and food, which is pleasure, and the body should be moving towards pleasure as well, whatever works for those bodies. It tends to be similar in most bodies.
Okay, so we could continue to I continue to try to figure out what I want to do next or whatever, but in free, like, that's really separate from just being free.
Yeah, that
you
is.
Still figure life out. You still live life. You still come and go.
The body still does its thing. It still tries to set up the nicest situation, but it no longer is for anyone. And that's the true freedom, when it's no longer seen as you, the body. It's no longer you having the experience. Nobody's having the experience, but the body will always move towards pleasure. And if you're more of a certain makeup, like this body, Lisa, it tends to be quite fickle, as in it likes to move from one thing to another, so it never really settles on one thing. I like to travel, and I'm always changing things. I buy clothes and I like them for a couple of weeks, I wear them every day, and then I'm like, done with that. Like, that's how this body's set up, and that will carry on. That's just the way of what the body is. But it's the freedom is that that's nobody doing it. It's not me. That's the experience that life is having at the moment through the apparent Lisa body, or through the Jackie body.
So even as I observe certain things, even I don't watch the news all the time, but when I do, and then certain things, and I'm feeling, wow, why is that happening? Oh, how could they do that to that child? Or she committed suicide, and all this they had to do was give her a ticket, and that's all just natural happenings in the body, not affecting the freeness of who I am or I'm not.
Yeah. But in the world of happiness and not happiness, for the person, more than likely watching the news all the time like that will make the body less happy. It's a more happy thing to watch positive news. We have like positive news on the internet. Like, it's so weird, the news that we have, like our world news, like the stories that they decide to pick up on. But that's nothing to do with freedom. So there might be a less happy body that watches the news all the time and is always watching and into dark things, but that's not to do with freedom. Freedom is that nobody's watching it, nobody's unhappy. The body experiences unhappiness, and that movement can happen from being a separate person who really feels like they are unhappy to being life itself. But it won't necessarily make the body happier. It might change the chemicals in the body. It changed the chemicals quite a bit in this body, but not all the time. That's
okay. So it's kind of a natural. If I'm sad, I'm sad.
Yep. If you're
I'm happy, I'm happy. If I'm depressed, I'm depressed.
Yeah, but the problem always has been in the human world that you thought that's who you were. You thought you were the body. You thought you were sad. You thought you were alive and you died. You thought you were the depression or the excitement, and the identification with it has been the suffering, that great suffering that's made things stick.
Okay. Wow, you really clarified a lot. So even situations that I'm going through personally, if, for example, I have a son that's going through some addiction problems, I can just accept, if that's for lack of a better word, that it is what it is. It's however way I'm feeling, but ultimately I am.
You are free, and that will happen, the acceptance or resistance, and whichever happens, it doesn't really affect who you truly are, which is boundlessness, which is beingness. But most probably the happier way for the human, which isn't to do with non-duality, but the happier way for the human is if the human accepts it's a situation. Because to resist that, you can't change someone's life, and you can't stop your son doing that. Like having had family members that are addicts as well, it's a complicated situation, and it will create. I mean, there's no escaping that pain that it will create. It's painful to watch someone go through that. But who they are and who you are isn't that. Isn't their behavior, isn't their addiction, isn't the worried mother or the anxiety. And all of that happens in boundlessness, always. The freedom is always right here, that total freedom. But in the world of the human, and a lot of the time in non-duality and waking up, people are trying to find the freedom in the human by not feeling anxiety, not feeling the pain or the worry for the son. But you won't find freedom in that. That's a natural response happening in the body. The freedom is always in boundlessness, in what is. That you aren't any of that, and yet all of it at the same time.
Okay. Wow.
And then more than likely, the human will begin to relax around that whole situation. Like the human, normally the tendencies when this begins to really be heard of the human relax a lot, but can't guarantee that. Doesn't come with a guarantee.
But I'm already feeling lightweight just by you saying what you said. I feel a light.
Yeah, it does tend to relax the person, but just it's what the person always gets confused about is it's not the freedom isn't a personal thing. The human is how the human is. The freedom is always here.
And so that type of freedom can't really be explained, right? No, it's just a type of freedom that you just, it's like a knowing.
Yeah, and it's always been that way. You've never been, the experiencer has never been the human in time. And that becomes just so apparent that you're not looking at this and experiencing this through a movement of time, not through somebody that came here or somebody that's got problems. The experiencer is always stillness, silence, boundlessness, nothing and everything.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
My pleasure, Jackie, and hopefully one day you can get onto Ustream.